In this episode, we discuss holding space for defying gravity. I'm just kidding. But we do discuss holding space. What does that mean? It's part of the cultural conversation that we're having, but what does it actually mean to hold space? Welcome to the Plumb Podcast. I'm Rosalee.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are the Plumb Collective. We are hearing people make fun of the phrase holding space, mock it, and not understand what that really means when it actually is something that we all need. We all require space to be held for us. Unfortunately, we don't experience it in our lives. We experience the lack of space being held for us. We know what that is, but we don't actually understand what it feels like to have space held for us, to speak into, be ourselves and be accepted in a safe space. That is the point of the Plumb Collective. This episode is a chicken and the egg conversation. I created the Plumb Collective to hold space for me to share my experience that created the Plumb Collective. I had a near-death experience where I learned so much about what it means to be alive by this experience of being dead. I came back to life with knowledge. I wanted to share it, but I didn't have the space to share it in where people could actually hear me and hold the space for me to speak and share my experience fully. I had to manage other people's reactions to the things I was saying. That changed the trajectory of the story I need to tell for myself. I needed to find a way to communicate my story to myself, hold the space for me to speak into the space, for me to witness what I said. That is what we're looking for when we look to other people to hold our conversation, to speak into them. Most people have a finite capacity. They can't hold everything that we have inside of us. Sarah and I created different paths, different containers to hold the space safely for us and for you. We can speak our stories to ourselves, either through verbal journaling or writing. We can witness the words that we use so that we get to know ourselves more fully. It's a very simple process, and yet it's complicated. We haven't been taught it. We've actually been taught the opposite. We've been taught to be disconnected from ourselves, to not hold space for each other, to not feel our feelings, and to not express ourselves. What we are doing is radical, but it's also very simple and very necessary and needed for this time in history. Humans need space to speak into. That is what this episode is all about. When somebody asks you a question and then you go to answer, and as you're answering, you see their eyes start to drift or their focus or attention not be on the answer to the question that they asked. That's such a simple everyday example of what it feels like to have space not be held for you. If by identifying that, then we can understand what it means to hold space. Because it's like, oh, yeah, I want to have somebody's attention and focus and literally just the space to say whatever I want to say and not be interrupted or all of those things.
Yeah. And to not feel that what you're going to say might be taken the wrong way, might be turned, stick to a person in a way that you wouldn't want it to stick to them, or that the other person is listening and instead of holding space and really listening, they're thinking about what they might say in response. I don't know if you noticed, but in the last Plumb Practice email, I did add a definition. It was holding space. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, it got defined in Plumb Practice, allowing whatever is occurring to occur, accepting that this is the moment, was how you defined it in Plumb Practice.
That's a great definition, I have to say. So I'm so glad you caught it because I forgot that I said that. But now that you say it, I'm like, fuck yeah, that's exactly. Can you say the second half?
I'm going to read the whole thing again. Holding space is allowing whatever is occurring to occur, accepting that this is the moment. And I think that came up in Plumb Practice because we were talking about you holding space for me in that particular session. Some emotional things came up for me and I experienced a bout of crying, and we were talking about that and how over time my relationship with crying is shifting as I'm learning to do that for myself instead of fighting the emotion that is present. There is something that shifts when we can allow what is occurring to occur and let this be the moment. And that is something that you do so well. And it's evident when you do photo readings, when you do clarity calls, and when you are in conversation with anyone. That is just a real natural gift that you have. And you've also grown that gift by allowing whatever is occurring to occur and letting this be the moment and meeting someone there.
Well, thank you. I've really cultivated that because I didn't experience it. I never had it with my mother or my father or the healthcare providers and friends and just in regular interactions. I was always too much for anyone to hold or to handle. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like when someone just cannot be with the moment. They can't be with my experience of whatever it is that I'm speaking of, and especially speaking of a near-death experience. That is something that has been near impossible for someone else to hold for me to share what actually happened for me. I get it that I'm saying things that are hard to hear, but they were hard to feel. They were hard to experience, and I experienced them. You don't have to have had a near-death experience to know what that feels like when you're trying to share something with someone else and you end up comforting them when really what you were seeking in that conversation was comfort for yourself, for the experience that you're sharing. And instead, you have to manage somebody else's reaction to what you shared. That's a very lonely place to be. It feels like there's no space for you at all inside of that conversation. It feels very isolating to not have space held for you to express yourself, to feel how you are feeling in that moment or the moment that you're talking about. It's so necessary for our human experience to be able to share how we feel and what we're thinking and what we might do and what we're worried about, and to just communicate and to have that communication, that self-expression be heard and felt, to feel seen and understood requires there to be a space to speak into, a space that is being held for us with love and appreciation and interest and curiosity and the willingness.
Allowing whatever is occurring to occur, accepting that this is the moment.
Yeah, it's so perfect.
Yeah.
I'm just so glad that I said it to you in the moment.
Yeah.
In the moment of me holding space for you, I said what holding space is, and now it exists. And that's what it is too. It's like things become like when they're inside of us, thoughts and feelings are just sort of swirling around and it feels confusing. We're unsure of things. We need to get those words out of our body in some way. If that is speaking to a trusted friend or family member or therapist, or if it's utilizing the diner and plum practice or having a photo reading, it really is possible to experience space being held for you through the Plumb Collective. In the clip you are about to hear, you will hear me verbal journaling about my feelings, about sharing my void experience, my near-death experience. I'm considering how to do that. I know what I want to do. I want to tell this story. And I know that if I were to tell it to one singular human being, it would be too much for them to hold.
Prior to this moment in time, we have created the diner and plum practice and photo readings as paths to self-connection. In this moment, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to share your story, you had some realizations around using the framework that we created to tell your story, and that the framework already exists for you to use to tell your story. And that is the chicken and the egg thing that is happening here, because the Plumb Collective and our offerings are all created out of the experience that you want to be able to talk about. And the way that you'll be able to talk about it is through what we've created.
Yes. The thing that was the realization, though, was a third part. My NDE and the diner, I knew were connected in a mirror image in a loop. I was processing this through this experience. What was a realization for me was that my childhood being recorded by my mother made me refer to the camera as Cam, as a person, as an entity. I have used the diner and plum practice and my experience with photo readings as a way to shift my energy and clear things for myself in connection to my childhood so that I can record myself. That is what I've been doing this whole time. The realization I had in this clip is really this connection that Cam was always my friend. My mother used the camera as a way to harm me, and I have reclaimed it as a way to help me. And so that was the realization. Who could hold the space for me? Cam can hold the space. That is hard for me to feel and accept and connect with, because it actually creates a bigger loop of not just this moment and the NDE, but this moment and my whole life. It really feels like full circle. It also feels really massive. As of this moment, I haven't recorded the void experience yet. I have been gearing myself up to it. I've been inching myself closer to the moment. I trust that I will feel when it is time and I will meet the moment. There are small steps, actions that I can take along the way that gets me closer to that moment so that when the moment appears, I'm ready for it. And that's something that we can all do in our lives. It's not just one action that you take one day. It's these little moment to moment choices that we make that prepare us for the moment when it comes. That's really what I feel like I'm sharing through all of this, is we can create safety for ourselves. Safety occurs through this process of learning how to hold space for ourselves. In doing that for ourselves, we can learn to do that for each other. People now have a clearer understanding of what I'm saying because there's more parts of the story that are out there. Like, oh, the hot tub and the waterbed, and all the photos and all the school papers and the hoarding and then this and the men and the diner and the food restriction and the breastfeeding. It's like, oh, well, I hold all of that. It's fucking hard to try to explain that to somebody because I open my mouth and people are like, your mother loved you so much. A mother wouldn't do that. You're reading too much into it. You're too sensitive. That didn't happen. Or so much distress in someone's face that I'm comforting them just for hearing the lightest version of what I could describe, of what actually happened to me, what I lived, my everyday. I do not fault myself for the fact that it's been impossible to say it in one fell swoop. No one could handle it. I have handled it. I am handling it. We have built something that can handle it. And then people can touch in and pause it and come back to it, or not listen to it, or read the transcript, or skim it. They can choose the intensity or the level of listening, or how deeply they connect to what I'm saying or not. But I'm not putting it in someone or on someone and then dealing in the moment with their reactions, which then changes the trajectory of my sharing, because then it's like, well, no one is holding the space for me. No one has been able to hold the space for me. And then the people that I feel like have the capacity to do that, I'm like, I don't want to fill the space with this because it's going to change you. It will. So I can't be responsible for like pouring it directly into someone. But I can hold the space for myself I can speak it into the space. I have done the work to be at a place where I can record myself. Cam can hold the space, for fuck's sake. And I can speak to Cam. And then I can choose to share it how I want. And my mother has no power over that. It's all me. I have to speak to myself on a regular, consistent, gentle basis. I only want to say this once. That's a protection. I want to tell this story to myself. I want to hear myself say it. I had an experience. It's important for me to talk about it. I'm sharing my void experience. It's for me to say it once. I'll talk about it after, but to put it all in one spot, I don't want to do that a lot of times because it's hard. It needs to be in one spot so that you can understand. I couldn't talk about it in one fell swoop. The traditional ideas, family, no. Friends, no. Therapists, no. People think, oh, you just talk to somebody or get help, go to therapy. Those things are dependent on human beings. And human beings have their own experience and their prejudice and bias and what they don't know. If you don't know the depths of humanity and what people will do and do and want to do, enjoy doing, you won't be able to hear my story on first listen and hear my experience. You'll be stuck in your experience, your resistance, your denial, your feelings. And I understand that, and it's important for you to have your feelings, and it's important for you to work through your resistance, work through your denial, and question it, and how that relates back to your childhood and the generational things in your family and your community and your culture and all of the things. There's so much that happens on first listen, but none of it has anything to do with me, my humanity, and my being comforted and held and cared for. So I needed to find a different way, and I think I did. I think I am. I had to sort of not see the whole picture of the framework as I was building it. I saw the parts that were important, or I felt like, ooh, it has to be. Like, there were many things that I was insistent on, and I didn't know why, but I just was like, it can't be this, or it has to be this. But I would be like, well, I don't know why. Like, I can't defend it. I can't explain it to you. I just know for sure. Now that I'm using the framework and I'm putting my life inside of it, I'm like, oh, okay, I get why. I understand. I'm so proud of myself that I didn't need to figure it out when I was building it so that I can have the experience of a participant. Oh, nothing has worked for me and this works for me. It's everything I've needed to process the hard and the wonderful things that have happened in my life. And it's my life. And it's hard to talk about. It's hard to think about. It's hard to feel. I have the memories, but it's hard to push play on them. You know? Like, they're just sitting there inside me. But to push play and to invite you all to watch requires more of me. It requires me to be so brave and so sure of what I feel and what I experienced and what I believe. It requires me to be so full of myself. And I am. I've always been full of myself. My capacity has now grown so I can be even more me, more fully me, and I can share that with you. Okay, I don't know how it's gonna look. I don't know how I'm gonna do it yet. I just am trusting that it'll feel right. It'll feel like the moment, and I'll just push record and I'll start talking. and something will happen. That's how we got here. I don't need to know how. I don't have to figure out the process. I just need to be me and process it. Put it in the framework. The framework works. It feels like magic to me. And also, I can explain it all. I can tell you why it works and how we got here. It just might take me a little bit to say it, and it might take you a little bit to hear what I'm saying, understand what I'm saying, and feel what I'm saying, and then believe what I'm saying for yourself, because you have your own experience with it. Express yourself, be who you are, but you need to find out who you are first. And then the choices become so clear of what you want, because you know how you feel.
Holding space is allowing whatever is occurring to occur, accepting that this is the moment. Holding space for ourselves and each other is something we can all learn how to do. If you'd like support with expressing yourself, knowing how you feel, and connecting more deeply with yourself, check out the links in our description box. We'll have links to photo readings, our Plum Practice membership, our free session of Plum Practice, and the diner. Everything that we created through the Plum Collective are paths toward you, toward connecting with you through holding space for yourself. Tune in next week for a new episode of the Plum Podcast, where you'll hear a new conversation unfold from a new starting point. The conversation will be different, but we will always express ourselves authentically, and we create the space for you to do the same. I mean, as I was saying it, I was like,
Yeah.
When we say that, when we say we create the space for you to do the same, we're talking about the Plum Collective. We're talking about what we're doing in these episodes and what we're offering through the Plum Collective. And if you haven't checked out our free session of Plum Practice, please do it. It is a free way that you can start learning how to hold space for yourself.